You know, Alex, I spent 20 years thinking that if I couldn't cut it with a chisel or weld it with a torch, it wasn't real making. Then I saw a resin print of a mechanical clock movement that was so crisp, it made my best woodwork look like it was carved with a spoon. My ego took a hit that day, let me tell you.
Is this you admitting that the old dog finally learned a high-tech trick? Because the last time we talked about 3D printing, you called it extruding toothpaste onto a glorified hot plate.
Well, that was FDM printing, the filament stuff. It has its place, mostly for making orange plastic brackets that eventually snap. But resin, stereolithography, that's different. It's like pulling a ghost out of a pool of liquid. It's light hitting syrup and turning it into bone-white precision. It's a bit of sorcery, honestly.
Sorcery that comes with a very specific, very chemical smell, Tiger. I've seen your shop lately. You look like you're prepping for a deep-sea dive or a biohazard cleanup with all the gloves and masks. Is the detail really worth the hassle of the goop?
Every bit of it. If you want a miniature that actually looks like a person and not a melted candle, or an engineering prototype with tolerances that would satisfy a watchmaker, resin is the only game in town. But you're right. It's a messy relationship. It's not like wood where you just sweep up the curls. Resin is a commitment to a process.
Okay, so floor's yours. For the folks who are staring at these sleek machines online, the Elegoo's, the Formlabs, and wondering if they should take the plunge, where does the journey actually start? Is it as simple as press print and walk away?
If only, you'd end up with a very expensive brick of cured plastic stuck to your vat. The magic happens long before you hit that button. It starts in the slicer. And if you treat the slicer like a suggestion rather than a blueprint, the printer will humiliate you.
I've seen the slicer screens. It looks like a 3D Tetris game where everything is covered in spider webs. What are those webs actually for?
Those are the supports, and they're the difference between a masterpiece and a tragedy. See, in resin printing, you're printing upside down. The machine is literally fighting gravity, trying to peel a thin layer of hardened resin off a flexible film at the bottom of the tank. If you don't have enough of those spider webs to hold the part, the print just stays stuck to the bottom, and you've got a pancake instead of a dragon.
So more is better? Just cover the whole thing in supports like a construction site?
That's the temptation. But then you spend 3 hours with a pair of snips trying to surgically remove a forest of plastic from your model, and you end up scarring the surface. The real trick, the thing that took me a dozen failed prints to grasp, is orientation. You never want to print a flat surface parallel to the vat. You got to tilt it. Angle that thing like it's leaning into a heavy wind.
Why the tilt, though? Is it just to make the supports easier to hide?
It's about surface area. Imagine trying to pull a suction cup straight off a glass table. It's hard, right? That's what happens if you print a flat layer. But if you peel the suction cup from the edge, it pops right off. Tilting the model reduces the peel force. It keeps the print on the plate and off the floor of the tank. And you always put the side you don't care about, the ugly side, facing down toward the supports.
Nature's way of hiding the scars. I get it. But I also heard you talking about hollowing models. Why not just print them solid? Is it just to save a few bucks on resin?
It's a bit of that. Resin isn't exactly cheap, especially the high-end engineering stuff from Formlabs, but it's mostly about physics. A big, solid block of resin is heavy. It creates massive suction. If you hollow it out, it's lighter and easier to print. But, and this is a big but, if you hollow it and don't add vent holes, you've basically built a suction cup that will eventually explode or trap liquid resin inside.
Wait, explode is a very strong word for a desktop hobby, Tiger.
Maybe not a fireball, but blowout is a real thing. If you have a trapped vacuum, the pressure builds until the wall of the print cracks, and then you have uncured resin leaking out onto your shelf 3 weeks later. I once had a beautiful bust of a gargoyle that started bleeding green goo onto my oak desk because I forgot to put a drain hole in the base. My wife still hasn't forgiven me for that stain.
Okay, let's say I get the orientation right. I didn't make a suction cup. The print finished. It's hanging there, dripping like a cave stalactite. We're done, right? I can go show it off?
You touch that with your bare hands right now and you'll regret it. That goop is toxic until it's fully cured. This is where the real work starts. The post-processing. You've got to wash it in high-grade isopropyl alcohol. You're looking to scrub away every last microscopic drop of uncured liquid. If you leave a film of resin on there and then cure it, all that beautiful detail you just paid for gets buried under a layer of cloudy plastic.
It sounds like cleaning a very delicate piece of jewelry that also happens to be a biohazard.
Exactly. Most people use these wash and cure stations now like a little jacuzzi for your parts. It spins the alcohol around for 10 minutes. Then, once it's bone dry, and I mean completely dry, you hit it with UV light.
What happens if you're impatient and hit it with the UV while it's still wet with alcohol?
You get this nasty white, chalky residue that looks like the model has been sitting in a salt mine for a decade. It ruins the finish. I've learned to use a little handheld air blower, one of those electric ones, to make sure every crevice is dry before the light hits it.
You know, for a guy who loves honest materials like iron and wood, you seem surprisingly obsessed with the perfection of these prints. What's the appeal? Is it just the precision?
It's the door it opens. Last week, I needed a specific replacement gear for a 1940s lathe I'm restoring. You can't buy them anymore. I modeled it, printed it in a tough engineering resin, and it fit like a glove. Or jewelry. My niece wanted a pendant with a detail so fine I couldn't have seen it without my magnifying visor. I printed it in castable wax resin, and we used it for lost wax casting in silver. It's a tool, Alex, just like a bridge crane or a table saw.
I see. So it's not just for toy soldiers and knickknacks, it's a way to bridge the gap between digital design and the physical shop.
Spotlight on the nail right there. It lets me be precise in ways my shaky hands sometimes fail me. But you have to respect the chemistry. You can't just pour the leftover wash water down the sink. You can't toss uncured supports in the trash. You have to cure the waste resin under the sun first. It's a responsibility.
That feels like the Tiger Den motto. Great results require great responsibility, and probably a lot of paper towels.
A literal mountain of paper towels.
All right, give me the bottom line for someone who's on the fence. If they're looking for that first win, what's the one thing they need to remember before they pour that first vat of resin?
Don't chase perfection on the first try. Your first print should be a calibration test, something like the cones of calibration. It's a tiny little object that tells you if your exposure time is right. If the cones touch, you're good. If they don't, you adjust your settings.
So, listen to the machine before you try to dictate to it.
Exactly. Treat the resin like you'd treat a piece of temperamental walnut. It has a grain, it has a temper, and it doesn't like to be rushed. But once you dial it in, there's nothing like seeing a 3D model you built with your own brain materialize in the palm of your hand, smoother than a river stone, and more detailed than a photograph.
Even if it smells like a nail salon and a chemistry lab had a baby.
Especially then. That's just the smell of progress, Alex.
Look, at the end of the day, a tool is just a way to extend your reach. Whether you're swinging a hammer or setting exposure times on an LCD, the goal is the same, making something that didn't exist before. Resin just happens to let you make it very, very small and very, very perfect.
Fair enough. I might just have to let you print me something, maybe a scale model of the shop.
Only if I can print a tiny version of you to keep me company.
Don't you dare.